podcast is brought to you by LMU Munich.
I showed you this before, okay, and we will now launch into this process together. And the first stage, as I mentioned, is what's called exploration or discovery phase. And this is, as I mentioned before, the phase where you want to have your eyes as wide and your mind as wide as open because you are really looking for inspiration, okay? A helpful tool for, getting, so basically because you don't know each other well as a team and you don't know what kind of knowledge there is and what you kind of want to work on is this so-called research map. And I guess some of you have used that for different research projects and so on. I think it's a very interesting and cool tool to simply map what you basically know, okay? So maybe you've seen that, and these, this tool has basically 4 coordinates, okay? The first one are the known knowns, okay? What do you know that you know? The second one is the known unknowns, right? So what do you know that you don't know about a specific topic or problem? For example, I don't know how many people are infected today by COVID-19. I can find that out, obviously. And then what are the unknown knowns, right? This is kind of more complicated because that's going into the realm of implicit knowledge. Okay, so something that I don't know that I know already, like riding my bicycle. I know how to do that even though I don't think about it, right? And this can be really interesting because we have so many assumptions and knowledge that is implicit, but do not actualize it. And this is why it's so great to have like a team, because your team and somebody else can elicit the unknown knowns that you already have. And the last one, and this is the most important and most interesting one, are the unknown unknowns, right? So everything that we don't already know or don't yet know what we know about, okay? And the basic idea of this tool is that you dig deep into, obviously, the unknown unknowns. And I can tell you right away, most people think they already know everything about a problem, right? So, oh yeah, I know that COVID could be solved by this and that. But as I mentioned, reality is complex and there's so much that we don't know yet at this very moment that we don't know yet, okay? So what all of that first stage of, researching the problem, of exploring it, is supposed to do is creating or bringing to life or making apparent all of these unknowns that we have, but also making us understand to falsify or test everything that we know that we don't know already. So what I would like you to do in the first step is, as a team, go to Mural, and I will show you how this works real quick. Right, so we go to the Mural in here, and I briefly, and we still need to figure out, because we changed your teams a little bit to put you into the right team. But basically what you can do here now, so for example, I'm now in the workspace of team called. I can open up, and you can see I already set up a design thinking canvas here and also a team canvas that you already filled out. What you can also do is open another Mural here, and there are a lot of different tools and templates that we will use today and over the course of the next couple of days, and you can fill in your own research map. So let me check. I should have opened up one already, but basically what you can do is simply use a blank mural and set it up so that you've seen the technology, how it works. So you call it research map team, what was it, blue, I think, or cold, whatever, and then you can add graphs into that thing, okay? And I would suggest that you can use one of these 2x2 grids, and then you map here your known knowns, known unknowns, knowns, and the unknowns. Is it clear how it works?
Yeah.
Any questions about this technology? Okay. And the first step would be that, you now as a team try to fill in everything that you know about a particular problem or kind of a particular area that you want to work in, and really have that as, as expansive as possible. Okay. So you could, in the first step, talk about, okay, what would be a problem that you would be interested in solving as a team? So is it a mental health issue? Is it a predictive issue? So how can we predict COVID-19? Is it something more into the direction of One Health issues? So how can we connect, the COVID-19 with the environmental issues or social justice issues and so on? But the basic idea is that you should now, put in everything that you know, that you don't know, and so on in this grid, because that is basically a visualization of your knowledge, right, as a first step. And the basic idea of this tool is that this will obviously change, right? Because then with the next couple of exercises, you will discover a lot of unknown unknowns that you did not know existed before. And then you put it in there, and then they can become known unknowns, and then you test them or falsify or validate them. And so this is basically a moving, a dynamic tool that you can use to basically keep track of your knowledge. Is that clear to everyone?
Yeah. So we're supposed to decide now what our problem will be.
You don't have to decide on the problem yet. So what you should do is, just have a discussion. What are your fields of interest? What do you think is a, interesting problem and so on? We will get after today's session, so tomorrow or today's workshop tomorrow, into understanding the problem better, right? It doesn't have to be a fixed problem. It can be an area, for example, it can be mental health, it can be the hospital, it can be, I don't know, other kinds of institutions, what is kind of relevant to you. But the basic idea is that you now share your expertise, but also where your preferences lie. And then what we will do is explore these fields again more and more. And then tomorrow we will have different perspectives on the problem, because the problem that you might now think is the problem could be something entirely else. But we will get to that tomorrow, by tomorrow only. So the idea of the iceberg principle of reality and the idea of this exploration phase is that you really delve into, underneath the surface. And what's always interesting, because what we want to do in this exploration mode is that we want to learn as much as possible. Okay, we want to open ourselves up to any kind of inspiration that we can have. And usually the best way to learn something is, since this is a human-centered innovation process or approach, we want to learn from humans or with humans. Okay. And the four basic questions that we want to ask ourselves when we want to learn from other human beings, because that's kind of the most reliable, to some extent, source of having a better understanding of the problem, are these four. Okay. The first question is, from whom do I want to learn? Okay. Usually a lot of people think, okay, the experts are the best people to tell me about something, but that's usually not. Usually experts are not the best people to ask when it comes to an innovation. The second question is, what do I actually want to learn? Okay, what are the data that I want to collect? So all of this kind of data collection, so you all are familiar with this. The third question is, how do I want to learn? Okay, what are the methodologies and methods and tools that I use to learn this? If I know what I want to learn. And the last question is, what do I want to take out of these learnings? Okay, what do I make of these explorations, insights that I now gathered? And you shout if you have questions, okay? I really want to start with the first one. So from whom do I actually want to learn? What's really important in this exploration phase is that you really get in touch with people, okay? And we will do this through a couple of different exercises and tools. What's really important is, so this is the first, and this is for most people, the hardest part of an innovation process, because they actually have to talk to other people. And since you're all in academia, you know this, right? Talking to others is really difficult. I'm just making fun, sorry. But really going out there, and I've seen this with people that work for BMW. I've seen this with students. I've seen this with professors and so on. This is really the first, challenge for a lot of people, to actually go out to people and ask them for their opinion about things. Okay, so this is really one of the first challenges that you will have to face, to actually talk to other people. Okay, and then, you can start with obviously yourself, but usually you are not the best user of your innovation. You are usually not the best person to judge the problem, right? Because maybe you are affected by the problem. Maybe if you talk about COVID-19 in general, obviously we are all affected. But if it's, if you want to tackle kind of the hospital system and how it works and how it kind of integrates COVID in their surroundings, or the restaurant business, then you are not, if you are not a restaurant owner or a hospital employee, you are not the best person to think about solving that problem. Okay? And so what's really important is, you really have to get in touch with the particular persons that are affected by the problem, right? So this could be nurses, it could be medical staff, it could be whatever is related to your problem. If it's mental health, it could be psychologists, it could be beneficiaries of your service or whatsoever. Okay, and if you are really afraid of getting in touch with other people, and I say something about that in a second, you can start with your friends. So ask your friends about these issues. You can ask your family and so on. But be aware that I don't know your family, but usually these insights that you will get are kind of tainted by your relationship that you have. So really try to go as far away from your inner circle to kind of an outer circle of talking to strangers, and because they could potentially give you more relevant insights. Okay, and obviously you are all stuck at home to some extent, so you really have to be innovative in terms of how you collect that data. Okay, and one suggestion could be that obviously you ask colleagues for their opinion or an interview and so on. You could also go on social media and text somebody there and ask them if they have time for an interview. Really be innovative and really try to be creative and bold in terms of getting in touch with people. The second aspect of kind of the framework of whom you want to learn from is basically this. Okay, so there are so-called anti-users of a service, and then there are extreme users of a service, right? And according to design thinking, it's always good to look at anti-users or extreme users, because they are very extreme in their behaviors, and we can learn from them better than from an average user. To give you an example, one of my teams, my innovation teams, they were working on saving electricity at home. Okay, so I told them I would be the perfect extreme user, because every day I turn off every kind of electricity gadget that is in my apartment, everything, like every single one. I'm really obsessed with that. So I'm a good interview partner, because I have an extreme understanding or an extreme set of behaviors from where they can learn. And then the idea is, as soon as you learned from the extreme user, then you can try to validate it with an average user. So we discover here by talking to me, for example, in this field, and then we try to make assumptions or kind of predictions about the average user in that field. Does it make sense to you, this idea of the extreme user? To give you another example, a couple of years ago, I saw somebody in the metro station. He was actually in the subway, and he crafted himself like a little gadget that made him pin his iPhone on the window screen so that he can watch Netflix at the same time without holding the iPhone. So this was really an extreme behavior of him making up his own kind of gadget that helps him to better watch Netflix, apparently on the subway. Okay, so we really are interested in these kinds of people, or somebody who doesn't use a particular product or service, because from them you can, better understand the kind of the emotional part about it. So why, for example, don't people, so an extreme or an anti-user of smartwatches. For example, I don't have a smartwatch, right? I don't like it. And then you could, understand the behavior by talking to me and, getting to know insights why I'm so reluctant to have a smartwatch and so on. Any questions about this?
Yeah, me.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Can I ask?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Just shoot.
Okay, so I wondered if you can go to a bubble where all of those extreme users will give you the picture of the usage of one certain product. For example, if all of my friends will not eat meat, they are all vegetarians.
Mm-hmm.
So how can I get the average picture of an average user of or I don't know, how can I guess how the majority of people do their shoppings, or
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what they order in a restaurant or something like this. So I can see this connection.
So do you want to understand how you get to know on the data on what does the average user look like? Is that your question?
Because if I'm in contact only with this extreme users,
okay. Yeah.
So I don't get this picture. So I have no idea how the average user, certain average user, use this certain product, because I know only.
Right, absolutely. But this is the idea of this process being iterative, right? So you want to explore by looking at anti or extreme users, and then you take up some of that insight that you gathered. To give you an example, so in terms of the energy saving example, I have an emotional joy switching off light bulbs, right? Because I think, oh yeah, no electricity is wasted or no money is wasted and so on. So the innovation team then thought, okay, how can we create that experience for an average user? So they went, if we go further in the innovation process, they tried to stick to that insight. Okay, apparently for this extreme user, switching off electricity is fun. How can we make it fun for average people? Okay, so the basic idea is that you take inspiration from extreme users and then try to give it to an average user. And how that works is you have to test it. Okay, we will talk about this tomorrow, but this is the basic understanding, that we try to get insights and then build hypotheses out of that. So the hypothesis would be turning off the light bulb is fun. It's tested with other people, and then we can verify or falsify it if it works. Does that make sense?
Okay, so this method works good in this discovery sphere, not in the second step, what is developing.
Exactly. These are different.
So working with the extreme.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so this talking or observe this extreme users is good only for discovery, but for developing, not really.
It is also good to talk to people, but we would talk to them in a different kind of way, right? So in this first phase where we are right now, we are still open to everything, right? So we will talk about interviews in a second, but we will try to get as much inspiration and knowledge out of these interviews and users as possible. In the second step, when we have kind of an idea, then we offer that to a tester tomorrow. And then we have different kinds of questions that we will ask them. Okay, so so I think it's always good in this human-centered design process to understand and be empathetic with people. but there are different kinds of techniques that we use and different kind of settings that we use in these different phases.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Are there any other questions about this? No, then I go on, if I can. Okay, this is another way of looking at what kind of users are out there. So this is called the technology adoption curve. Maybe you've seen that before, or you can also situate yourself in there. So for example, I am always a laggard because after everyone on this planet has adopted a technology or a trend, then I realize, oh, this could be interesting. So I'm very, very slow in terms of adopting technology. We have the innovators, obviously, who create the new innovation. Doesn't have to be a technology, can be something else. Then we have the early adopters that are very early, eager to try something out, even though it doesn't work. Then there's this chasm. And then we go from the early majority to the late majority. So you can basically do this with smartphones. You can do this with smartwatches. Basically, yeah, a lot of different kinds of new trends. It could be sneakers, whatever. Okay, so, and again, obviously it would be more interesting for you to talk to these people, right? Depending on the problem you want to solve, right? But you want to maybe talk to the persons that are very eager in adopting your problem or have a touch or in touch with the problem. Okay, second aspect. So what do I actually want to learn? It's really important, and because you're all from a scientific, academic background, that the data that we want to collect now is essentially qualitative data, okay? It is not about, having a quantitative study on how many people would do this and that. It is really about kind of this very nuanced understanding of humans, okay? So this very first step of exploration, and this is why it's called human-centered, is really about getting in touch with people and understanding their desires, their needs, their pains, and so on. And most of the time, this is not being done by, doing quantitative studies, but it's more about, trying to evoke stories. Okay, so for example, what was the story where I had the most fun switching off the light? Or what kind of emotions do they have? What kind of contradictions are there? For example, I don't know, you might know the contradiction of somebody being very ecologically friendly, but then eating meat or flying, right? So what are the contradictions in the human behavior that are, latent in the people that you talk to, and then to think about how can we, do something with that insight. So basically, what you all have to do now in this exploration phase is become psychologists and detectives, right? Because you really want to go for understanding and analyzing people and even understanding them better as they would understand themselves, right? And this is kind of the crucial aspect when you talk to them, when you observe them and so on, that you don't simply do what they want, okay? So we have a lot of innovation teams that simply go to the customer or the user and say, okay, what do you want? And the customer says, okay, I want this and that, then they bill it, but this is not what they want. And I think you all know that humans are always prone to lie and, don't say the truth or have changed their opinions. And the basic idea of design thinking is that we really dig into their psychology and make them, or, dig into kind of these emotions and understand what they actually want, even if they are not aware of wanting that. Give you an example, the iPhone, nobody was dreaming of an iPhone, right? Nobody would think of, okay, I need a smartphone. There's a saying by Henry Ford, so, from the Ford Corporation, who said, if I would have asked people what they want, they would have said faster horses, right? But they would not have said a car because they could not imagine that. And this is where innovation comes from. To give you an example, a colleague of mine did a innovation bootcamp or a course where the challenge was to redesign coat hangers, right? So the things that we have in our cupboards. So when they talked to people, so the teams, they said, so where do you hang your coats and your clothes? And they obviously all said, of course, in my cupboard, of course, in my coat hanger, whatever. When the teams actually went to the apartments of these people, this is what they found. This is where the clothes were. Here, here, here even, right? And the basic idea of this is that, as I mentioned, humans are not straightforward because maybe they were embarrassed and they would never say, okay, I actually have my t-shirts underneath a terracotta plant thing. And this is where kind of innovators come in and say, okay, this is interesting behavior. Why do people behave like that? Why would they go through the pain of, raising their plant or whatever is in there and then putting their dry clothes or their wet clothes in there? And what they realized, this team, was, okay, apparently this is the perfect way of drying your clothes. Okay, and from this they tried to come up with an innovation, a new kind of hook where it does not fold over like this, like a typical coat hanger, but something else. Okay, and it's a good example of how we use extreme behavior and use that for a new innovation. And this leads into the third part. So how do I actually want to learn? And it's not only because we don't have time left until tomorrow, but it's really fast, intimate, empathetic, creative, and immersive, and actionable. What I mean by this is, don't craft a study or a interview guideline that you will run for 6 months. Innovation means you want to be fast, okay? Because you want to make, as I mentioned, mistakes as fast as possible. You have hypotheses, you have assumptions, and you want to test them as fast as possible. So the quicker you are in gaining or raising your data, the quicker you can deliver a solution, the quicker you can give that to a customer, the quicker you can learn, okay, this was not the right solution, and then go back to the beginning, right? This means, so when I mention intimate, means it doesn't have to be an interview, it can be something else. It has to be empathetic. It's not about, simply sending around a survey, because usually surveys, and maybe you know about behavioral science and behavioral psychology, usually surveys are bad because people don't, are not truthful in terms of that. So be really creative in collecting your data. I will show you a couple of examples of these tools in a second. Okay, and as I mentioned, what you want to take out of this is basically insights that you would not get when you look at other data, right? So you want to be as close to humans as possible, to understand their behaviors, their mindsets, their emotions, and so on, because only then, and this is kind of the assumptions and one of the basic building blocks of design thinking, only then we can really create an innovation out of that is close to the human. Any questions about these principles? No? Yes? No? No? Okay. Here are a couple of tools that you can use. Okay, so one I already mentioned, the beginner's mind. So this is basically putting yourself into baby shoes. Okay, babies don't have shoes, so baby socks or whatever a baby has, and really asking yourself, why is that? Why is that? Okay, so this is one tool that you can use. You can also use empathy maps that I will show in a second and explain them. There's something called why-how lettering. Okay, so actually observe behavior in the context of your problem. Ask yourself, why is the person doing it and how is it doing it? Okay, and these are basically all tools that should give you a better understanding of digging deeper in behavioral science and how actually people I'll answer that in a second, how people actually behave. One of my favorite tools is called Fly on the Wall. And the basic idea of that, and it's kind of difficult but not impossible nowadays, is that you basically, like a fly on the wall, watch. Okay? So we had a couple of projects in supermarkets. So how can we reduce plastic waste in supermarkets and my other innovation teams? So what they did is basically, went into a supermarket and we're just standing there for half an hour or an hour and simply watch people how they shop. Because you would assume, we have so many assumptions that we know how people actually use their plastic bags or their grocery bags or their backpack and so whatsoever, but actually being there and understanding how people actually do it is so much more insightful, because there are so many more complex practices that or kind of counterintuitive practices that people do or how they behave that we don't actually know about. Another of my favorite tools is called the 5 whys, and it's probably the easiest tool ever, but also the most philosophical one, because you basically ask why 5 times. Okay, so this is also kind of my son and my daughter's killer technique. Why? But this really helps you to get to the core of a problem. So for example, people don't believe in science and the relationship to COVID-19. Why is that? Because they have a ragged understanding of science and what it can do. Why is that? Because social media has influenced them in their behavior. Why is that? Because algorithms have done it, and so on, right? So you usually, by asking five times why, you usually try to get into kind of the core structure of a problem. There's also something called a user journey that I will explain in a second, but this is basically a visualization of your user, how he or she uses a product or uses a service. So this is often used in kind of digital solutions. So for example, I create an app and the user journey would be, so how do I go into, the app? What do I have to log in? What's the next page that I see, and so on. But this can also, and is also being used in healthcare, for example, to have a user journey of, somebody going to the hospital, for example, and understanding the user journey through a hospital experience, for example. Something that is really, really insightful as well is called self-immersion. Okay, so basically putting yourself into the shoes of the user by immersing yourself into their experience. So how that could work is, so in terms of, so what my teams usually do is in terms of working with beneficiaries. So for example, if you work for a service for a person who is handicapped, then try, for example, spending some time in a wheelchair, or try spending some time, I don't know if you know these old person suits where you actually can kind of immerse yourself into the feeling and kind of bodily constrictions of an old person, but there are different kinds of ways where you can actually immerse yourself into the experience of your user group. And then finally, obviously, there are also interviews, and as you gathered from my insights before, I'm kind of doubtful sometimes about interviews because I'm just doubtful about human nature and their truthfulness to other people. Okay, there were a couple of questions. Anna mentioned a survey seems to be a very practical way to collect data. It is very practical, but I have the feeling that you won't gather a lot out of it, right? So if you really look, so again, do a self-immersion. When you answer a survey, are you always truthful about that? Are you always, and maybe you don't even know what the problem really is, right? So maybe you're not the right person to answer it. Obviously, it helps you to, collect data, but I have some doubts in terms of how much insights this data can give you for a new innovation. Okay, Mario also said, unfortunately, quantitative studies are subject to many forms of bias. Yes, this is what I mentioned from an academic perspective. Mixed method studies are recommended. Yes, I absolutely agree. And I would add from innovation perspective, also mixed method studies would work, but it doesn't have to be a study. It can be a mix of these different kinds of tools. And I briefly wanted to introduce you to 3 tools. So this is called the empathy map. Looks like an old, very big, bald guy in the middle. And the basic idea of it is that you map, different kinds of empathy levels of your user. Okay, so we start, who is it that we're empathizing with? So who is the person the user that we want to focus on? Is it a nurse? Is it a doctor? Is it a mental health patient? Is it a psychiatrist? Is it the environment? Whatever. Okay, and then you go on, what do they need to do? Okay, what is the pain or the problem that they're facing right now? Then you go on, what do they see? Are they actually, what kind of solutions are already out there? How do they interact visually with their surroundings? And then number 4, what do they say? This could be a connection to interviews, for example. And then what could be interesting, what do they do? Are there any contradictions between what they say and what they do, for example? Yeah, to give you an example, I know a lot of people from my friends and colleagues that have mental health issues, but they want to treat themselves. Okay, so can we, and this is where innovation comes into the game, how can we resolve these contradictions between, I know that I should see a therapist, but I don't do it. So what is the gap? How can we solve that gap? Then also it goes on, what do they hear? Which goes into the area of, their social surroundings. So what do other people say about this? So my wife always tells me, okay, you should see a therapist, or she said, no, don't do it. Okay, so this is really interesting in terms of, understanding the surroundings of a person and, having a better understanding where we start our intervention to change them, right? Or to solve that problem. And then in the middle, right? So what do they think and feel? And usually this is, being separated into these 2 spheres of what are their pains and what are their gains. Okay. This again is very business-like. So what are the pains that the customer, the user has, and what are the gains that we, want to give him, right? So for example, a mental health affected person or with a disorder has a pain obviously of, the kind of symptoms and so on. And again, could be, being relieved from that. Could also be social pressure, social, acknowledgement and so on. So it's kind of more diverse and more complex than you might think by saying, still, in contrast to saying, okay, well, just go to a therapist. Maybe there are more factors behind that. I mentioned this already. So this is called a user journey, right? So it's basically a visualization. Okay, so I order something online in this example, then I call and so on. So what is the journey that your user has to take through, solving the problem or not solving it, right? So this could be in terms of COVID-19. What is the user journey for being tested, for example? There are different user journeys in different countries right now. So talking to the health office, talking to your doctor. So what are the user journeys? Because if you have that visualized and have a better understanding of that, then you can understand where, room for innovation comes in, right? For example, there's a problem with, connecting users with the database. So I don't know, whatever, right? So this is where we can improve things and make it better. Are there any questions about these methods? If not, I heard something? No. If not, it's again working time for you. And what I would like you to do is try to understand who your user is. Okay? So you've talked a little bit about the problem. What I would like you to do now is, try to focus it more and try to understand the persons and users involved in that problem. Okay? And then what you could try to do as a first step is try to fill out one of these empathy maps or do a user journey for this particular user. And you can do this as a team, but you can also separate these tasks in terms of your team so that it is more efficient and just break down the working packages for this. Okay, I would like to do a quick check-in just to get you all to speed. And I thought, and I mentioned this already yesterday, we could do a little empathetic interview. And the way this works, maybe you've done that before, is that you basically have an interview one-on-one, with the only exception is that just one person speaks, okay? And the other person just listens and, can react with nonverbal cues, like, okay? So no talking back, just listening, and the other person has to talk all the time. We will have 2 rounds, okay? So you will be matched one-on-one, and I hope that the algorithm matched you so that you haven't talked to the other person that you will meet in a second in the breakout room. And then so after the first round, you will do a little reflection and think about, okay, what have you gathered as the listener from what the other person has said, okay? And this is a good way to, get into this idea of interviewing people and also, looking at nonverbal cues and analyzing what is being said and what is being meant. So you have, I'd say, 5 minutes for each round, and then a 3-minute round of reflection. So 5 minutes first interview, 3-minute round of reflection, then again 5 minutes interview, and again 3-minute reflection. And the topic, what you should talk about, I thought, if that isn't too personal, could be, how did I feel during the COVID-19 lockdown? Okay, just to mention that again. So we are here. So yesterday we kind of started here in this phase, and I would like to give you some more time in staying into this exploration and discovery phase until we go over to the definition of the problem. And since you have been very, very energetic and very very good in coming up with your interviews yesterday, I saw a lot of your interviews and guidelines and so on. I briefly want to reiterate that obviously it's good to have kind of a survey and that you can send out and so on, but having the learning from right now, right, talking to people one-on-one, I would really encourage you to go for individual kind of face-to-face interviews. Okay, so either you come up with, you call somebody that you know or don't know about your problem to, have an interview with this person, or you chat with him on social media and so on. But I would really recommend not to send out simply a survey where people have to fill out, a particular survey, because as I mentioned yesterday, and I hope it became clear with the exercise right now, that there's so much hidden in, in the actual interaction with somebody else. So I tried to frame it a little bit differently. So the goal is not to have 20 interviews for the next hour, but it's more like this. So I want you to get rejected for an interview at least 10 times. Okay? This means that you would actually have to get in touch with people and be rejected. And this is part of the learning journey. So what do you do with that rejection? But you will see, hopefully, that you have this assumption of being rejected all the time for an interview. And most of the time you will succeed in getting an interview. Okay? So this is really, the next hour, I would give you again time to, try to reshape your, or kind of sharpen your interviews, get in touch with people, call them, talk to somebody else on the street, wherever you are, but collect as much data as possible in terms of your interviews.